Is it possible to attain a better world? Or is this the current world in which we live the best that we can hope for? My name is Dr. Kajit John Paul, and I'm here to reflect on this question. I will also introduce to you what is called cognitive justice and the movement for cognitive justice. I'll make 5 points today, this morning. The first is again the question: is it possible to make the world better than what we have now? Or are we sentenced to what we have at the moment? That's number one. Secondly, we seem to have competing forces in the world. We may call them negative forces and positive forces, which seem to be competing for the life of the world. And humanity is at the heart of this fierce competition. On the one hand, you have the negative forces. Let us look at contemporary happenings and recent history to see the manifestation of the negative forces. First, today, you have thousands of homeless people at the borders of Europe. Where are they from? Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, some of them from Somalia, Eritrea, and so on. Why are they there? Most of these people no longer have homes. Their homes are anything else but homes now. What they need is food, shelter, they need help. They have no homes anymore. Their homes have been bombed. They have, well, no real direct influence over the political decisions made that have put them in the circumstances in which they find themselves today. War is a manifestation of the negative forces competing for the soul of humanity. Now, added to the refugee crisis, you see trends of arbitrary killings of people by some unjust wars going on in different places, some policies and terrorist activities as well. Unfortunately, last week, 2 of my colleagues back in secondary school in Nigeria were slaughtered. They were traveling from one part of Jos in Plateau State in the middle belt of Nigeria to another, and they were killed. 2 promising young men. They were 6 years my senior in secondary school. May their souls find rest and peace. In the northeast of Nigeria, the group Sunnah, I can't remember the full Arabic name, or Jihad, Boko Haram, popularly known, is killing people. You have similar occurrences in the Middle East, Syria and Iraq. You have the Rohingya minorities in Myanmar also suffering a similar kind of persecution with a different kind of mode. And you have such negative manifestations spread across the world. In South America, some of the indigenous people, their battles with corporations to protect their ways of life. In North America, similarly, across Asia, across different parts of Africa. South Sudan signed a peace deal yesterday. We hope it works. And you find these spread a very serious manifestation of the negative forces, the negatives competing for humanity's soul. Worst of all, this year marks the 70th anniversary of that horrendous event that took place on the 6th of August 1945, Hiroshima, the atomic bomb dropped by the United States military. And a few days later, on the 9th of August this month, another one was dropped at Nagasaki. Tens of thousands, almost 200,000 people directly killed, most of them civilians. I do not know how else to describe this but the manifestation of the negative trends, tendencies of humanity. That was the Second World War. And in the context of the United States today, you also have these popular protests. I can't breathe. Black lives matter. All lives matter. That the system is constructed in a way that particular identities are perceived with a premonition, with a presupposition, with a stereotyped concept, thinking of guilty without any charge, before any charge. No need for any charge. They shoot the gun, pull the trigger. Not by armed robbers or murderers, but by officers of the state. That is another manifestation of the negative forces competing for the soul of humanity. However, to the question, is humanity intrinsically evil? That cannot be the case. Because you see, take any person you would describe as evil. Provided such a person is human, you would definitely find elements of good in that person, in those people. Most of them caught up in ways of thinking that were crafted before they were born. They were born into them. Many of them caught up in systems and structures constructed for them. They see themselves as trying to make a living, as doing what is right. Their idea of normality is just that brutal, violent, exclusionary idea of normality, dehumanizing idea of normality, what Paulo Freire would call the oppressor as a victim of the ideas that compel them to act the way they do. They need help. In other words, the evil, the negatives, coexist with the positives, and there lies the promise of a better future, of a better world for humanity. Across the world, as we speak, you have movements against war, anti-war movements. A scholar described the anti-war movements against the invasion of Iraq in 2003 as a superpower back then, even though the political construct of the world totally enabled the ignoring of these very powerful voices, which are, the effects of which we still feel today with the refugees at the borders of Europe, America far off over there. And we have people protesting against nuclear weapons, and that reminds us of the great positions, the powerful positions assumed by great men and women in the past against the creation and production of weapons of destruction. Which are simply reflections of a destructive way of thinking. Haile Selassie, Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, in October 1963, in his address before the United Nations, he made two key points. The first was the need to denuclearize the world and to ban all forms of development of nuclear weapons and testing. The second was about equality. He famously said, unless and until the philosophy which holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, the dream of world peace will not be attained, and of global citizenship will not be attained. Until that day, the dream of lasting peace and world citizenship and the rule of international morality will just be a fleeting illusion forever pursued, never attained. Well, equality, global citizenship, the desegregation of society into first-class citizens and second-class citizens and third-class citizens, whether explicitly written in the laws of the state or implicitly written in the practice, political and social practice, is still ongoing and is a battle and needs to be fought. The point here is that there are voices that have been calling for a better world, denuclearization. As we speak, there are hundreds of humanitarian organizations across the world, here in Scotland, in Edinburgh, on Princess Street, Save the Children, Cancer Research, volunteers working, asking people to send a text, to make donations, to help. That is their way of reaching out, of doing the little they can from where they stand. and speak to people, speak to the human heart. The human heart is noble, is beautiful. Great things come from the human heart. And you also see different efforts to help combat terrorist organizations, people who attack innocent people. Well, even though the military solution is not always the best, but the effort, you can see the intention that underpins what those who advocate military means have in mind, even though we all know blood only engenders more bloodshed. Violence engenders violence. And it's always better to take the pacifist way to discourse, to come out with a thinking that facilitates peace. In this crucial battle and balance between the negatives and the positives, we can make the world a better place by harnessing the positives, the potentials of humanity. And that means we have potential candidates everywhere, even amongst the most evil of humans. That is the third point. The fourth point, a very crucial point I will make today, is regarding the world as it is today. What is the world today? The world, I call it the International World Order. One of the US presidents called it the New World Order, NWO, dominated by neoliberal capitalist ideals, which Francis Fukuyama said was the last man, the end of history, and the last man, the triumph of capitalism, and the liberal democracy of the Western model to be spread across the world. And yes, we have seen the effects of spreading democracy even by force, from Libya, Syria, Iraq, and so on and so forth. Calls to question many things. Now, this international order is universalizing the universal. You have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You have a view, an idea of universality, which seems problematic in its manifestations. And for me, I completed my PhD at the University of Edinburgh. And I had to contend and look at these things, how the construct of the world is complicit in the problems and conflicts we experience across the world. And I came to the conclusion that the international world order, the universal, the new world order in which we live, is intrinsically unjust. And it is founded on philosophies and principles that are indefensible today. Philosophies dating back to what, in my reckoning, my research reckoning, 581 years, the year 1340, the year Sublimus Dei was promulgated by Pope Eugene IV, 1434 rather. That was the year in which you find a document talking about Europeans invading an independent peoples and enslaving them. Pope Eugene in that letter condemned the practice. So you find the beginnings of the new world order. Of course, slavery was a very crucial foundation of that. That was the start. So you find, I'm working on a book right now which talks about these issues, which brings them out, how our present world order is unjust. The philosophies which are at the basis of the construct of the world order, the international that we have today, are totally, I'm sorry to say, rotten. They cannot be defended anywhere. They cannot stand the test of humanity's awareness. What are we doing? Structures have been built upon these philosophies over the years. And every protest against the injustice of the system is met by some ad hoc amendment to add, without any fundamental rethinking of the conceptual basis of the structure. Who are the founding fathers? When I say the thinking is absolutely unjust and indefensible, I'm referring, for example, people like Charles Darwin, who categorized humanity into the civilized and the uncivilized, predicting in his Descent of Man that the civilized races in a short period of time will totally exterminate and replace the uncivilized. Page 201 of that book. That's what he said. And it looks like many European nations use that as a kind of a manifesto to pursue their foreign policy towards others during slavery, colonialism, and so on and so forth. Another person is Friedrich Hegel. If you ever wondered why Africans are stereotyped as people, non-Europeans generally, and Africans specifically, as people who never rise above the consciousness of a 7-year-old child, or that they have no idea of civility, they are incapable of advancing, of understanding, of knowledge, have no philosophy. You need to read Hegel. Then you have other scholars along the same, manifesting similar ways of thinking, like David Hume, first of all. Well, all these are discussed in the book I'm putting together to advance the cause of a more just world order. Then you also find, well, Thomas Hobbes is probably the most popular. He said, life is short, nasty, brutish, where there's no order. Well, those pessimistic ways of thinking were very crucial to the founding of the present world order in which we live. Yes, there have been positive voices. You have the voices of Immanuel Kant, contemporarily John Rawls in Justice as Fairness. But even these have their lapses. Of course, Immanuel Kant, any day, I would say, stands out in his theories for world peace. You find very inspiring insights, which would have been difficult to accept in the predominant internationalizing philosophies of his times. You have other ways of thinking, like the Islamic conception of justice, which is a very crucial factor in the construction of the world order as we have it today, in ways many don't even realize. Well, this is also explored in the book I'm putting together. In fact, well, I wouldn't say much about that. It will be in the book. So these philosophies are philosophies of aggression, of exclusion, excluding the other, objectification of the other as the enemy to be exterminated or won over or subjugated, you know. And when you see humanity's capacity for building weapons, the nuclear atomic weapon came from that kind of attitude. So the negatives have been elevated, over-explored, and brought to the point that humanity has produced weapons capable of wiping out the world several times over and over. America invented the nuclear weapon in a short period of time. The Russians had some of the most sophisticated nuclear weapons. Today, what do you have? Pakistan, India, North Korea, the United States herself, Russia, France, and Britain here. Well, during the Scottish referendum of independence debates, the Scottish people made a very strong point about the amounts, the enormous amounts used on these weapons that may never be used. We hope they never get used. What if humanity had a way of thinking that diverted these negative investments into positive investments? Would the world not be a better place? Well, you see, we keep trying to build a better world on faulty roots. And that is why I'm coming to the next point, which is introducing to you the idea of a different world order. I call it the pluriversal world order, founded on the idea of cognitive justice. Cognitive justice was coined by Professor Shiv Viswanathan, an Indian professor, and further developed by scholars like Professor Boaventura de Souza Santos and Professor Maja Maha van der Velden. Very insightful ideas. They talk about it as a sociological topic in terms of technology for Professor Maja van der Velden. But I took up cognitive justice in my PhD, and I developed it into a political philosophy a constitutional theory, and a theory of justice. And since completing my research last year, my PhD last year, I've been building this book, working on a book, advocating building the cognitive justice into a theory of justice centered on identity as a basis, conceptual basis for reconstructing a just world order. And what is it? What is central to cognitive justice is the idea that humanity is equal. And I want you to think about this question. You as an individual, I'm speaking to your heart because I trust the human heart. It is mysterious. It is capable of amazing things. Do you believe sincerely that you are equal to every other person? Do you believe, on the contrary, perhaps, that you are superior? And how does your attitude, your reflection, your thinking towards other humans, what does it say about you? Or do you think, do you feel, do you act that you are inferior to others? You see, the point is, the declarations on equality against racism, they still sit upon the faulty conceptual foundations and the structures built upon those foundations. So you see, even though you have what you call an African-American president, it hasn't really changed any structural thing. Not to speak of the conceptual. Perhaps the world, particularly the dominant thinking in the world, which is a Western way of thinking, has somehow run short of imagination, ideas, concepts. It's like when Francis Fukuyama said, the last man, the doors were shut to new conceptual ways of thinking, philosophizing. Well, I tried to break that barrier, to break that curse in this book. And so, cognitive justice has certain central things. First, the diversity of the world, plurality, then equality as a basis for advocating justice, which not only resides in the realm of rhetoric and declarations, no, but in structures, in institutions, and our idea of forming organized society and the Constitution. You see, back in 1919, the Japanese contingent to the League of Nations in its formation made a case for the inclusion of an equality clause, equality of all humans, in the Charter of the League of Nations. But because of the sentiments of southern parts of the United States, the slavery sentiments, the superiority sentiments, and the colonial legacies of Britain at the time, even though most of the members, most of the 19 voted for the inclusion of that clause, the British were happy for the American president then to veto that, and it was excluded. And you can see the atrocities that came up in the build-up to that. Was it that the world was incapable, conceptually incapable, of viewing other as equal? Then, perhaps. But, well, perhaps it was impossible. There are many things that seem impossible until they're done. For example, at a point it was impossible for a non-European to be equal to the European. It was impossible for slavery to be abolished. It was impossible for savages and barbarians, that means non-Europeans, to govern themselves until there was decolonization, even though that was carried out in a very faulty manner, as scholars like Basil Davidson have said. So that's about equality. Then you build justice based on these ideals. Then the idea of sustainability, which brings in different issues like the kind of economic model the world runs itself upon, where again, the positive and the negative, humanity's capacity to produce, to generate, to create, coexist with a very gross imbalanced system, concentration of wealth and extreme poverty at once. Thomas Porge, the American scholar on poverty, talks about how the world order constructed by the West imposes and aggravates poverty in the rest of the world, in the global South. Thomas Piketty, in his recent book, Capital in the 21st Century, came to two major conclusions. Well, I wouldn't go too much into that, but these points pull together the reality, the truth, that there's a need for a new conceptual framework, political philosophy. That is what I try to give the world. It is a book called, it's now, I've finished writing it, the draft is done, finding ways to have it published now. Cognitive Justice for Pluriversal World Order, an Identity Theory of Justice. That's the title of the book, and I want you to look out for it. Part of that thinking on that book is something I've been working on called a movement for cognitive justice. Though little, I found so many people sympathizing with the idea in such a way that compels me, makes me feel like I have a duty to humanity to build this and carry it forward. At a conference in January, the keynote speaker here in Edinburgh, Professor Hossein Kalbamu from Botswana, listened to my ideas. I had a conversation and he picked up on it. He said, yes, academic qualifications, the doctorates of qualifications should not just be for us to advance and build our careers and, well, what is that if we leave the world where it is? Where if we make money, we become institutionalized into the same structures and orders which we have known very well how to critique, whose problems we've identified, without starting something to move the world forward. And so we have started a movement for cognitive justice. I have absolute confidence in the ideals of the movement because it aspires to make the world a better world, a pluriversal world order. We have a website, www.cognitivejustice.com. We also have, besides the website, a Facebook page, the Movement for Cognitive Justice. You see it there. You can like and follow our developments, posts. We're also on Twitter. Our Twitter address is COJUST_MCJ4PWO. I'll come again. That's COJUST, COJUST_MCJ for Movement for Cognitive Justice, and 4 as in number 4, then PWO, Pluriversal World Order. So that's COJUST_MCJ4PWO. I'll come to a close by again asking the question: is a better world attainable? What does your heart say? Will you give in to the pessimistic view that man is intrinsically, humanity is intrinsically violent, selfish, evil? Or would you be a little bit more optimistic in trusting in yourself, in us? I believe in myself. I believe in you. Michael Jackson singing in the background talks about making the world a better place. I somehow believe, strongly believe, we can make the world a better place.